A peaceful beach day shattered by screams. "Get on the ground!" The whole family face down in the sand. But when the father calmly flashes his FBI badge, the beach goes dead silent. KABG's cops freeze. Phones roll, and social media, it detonates like a bomb. Don't blink, because this is where power flips, and racism gets dragged into the light. The sand was warm beneath the children's feet as they chased the waves upon a sunlit Californian beach. Laughter filled the air, lit by the golden glow of an endless summer afternoon. A serene family scene disrupted only by the sudden appearance of sharp voices and authoritative commands that shattered the coastal calm. "Get down on the ground! Now!" The words rang out like gunshots, pulling every eye toward their origin. The scene had inexplicably transformed from joyful to chaotic. At first, Jocelyn and David Marshall couldn't believe what was unfolding around them. Vacation was supposed to be a time of peace, a precious, rare respite from life's burdens. Yet, here they were, being cornered by the local police as if they were fugitives, as if their very presence were a crime. The sparkle of the ocean faded behind the dark silhouettes of uniformed officers advancing briskly, hands resting threateningly on their holstered firearms. The beachgoers turned into a silent audience, heads craned from all corners, whispers of confusion and apprehension circulating like a low, restless tide. "Pops, what's happening?" Their eldest, Malik, looked up at David with panicked eyes that sought reassurance. David, torn between explaining the unjust scene before them and comforting his children, felt a deep-seated anger begin to simmer. It was a bitter taste, one sorely familiar yet never numbed by repetition. Each step the officers took was a reminder of the battles he had fought against this very kind of prejudice. Yet, anonymity was his current veil, offering no shield against this misjudgment. Their demand was firm, hands behind their heads, face down in the gritty sand. For a moment, Jocelyn and David hesitated, hearts pounding with a mix of fear and disbelief. What were their crimes exactly? Was it their skin, their presence in a place not they? "Sir, there's a mistake. We aren't doing anything wrong here. We're just—" Jocelyn began, reaching for reason amidst the madness. The officer's eyes, covered partially by reflective sunglasses, offered no hint of concession, his voice unyielding. "Ma'am, comply or face arrest for obstruction." Faced with no alternative, they complied, every grain against their skin a reminder of the humiliation, the ground symbolic of societal tears they were forced to sink below. David held his terror for his family and his anger carefully in check, each second stretching out like an unheard scream. Instead of reacting, he reached with an invisible hand into the reservoir of trained composure he had amassed over his career. Even without the ability to see beyond the heels of the officers, David knew the crowd's reaction tethly were uncomfortable, murmuring some recording, others simply transfixed by this public unfolding of silent, pervasive prejudice. Time stretched, and his family's calm began to fray. It was infuriating, dehumanizing. The officers did not know who David was, and in this moment, that ignorance was a dangerous thing. His professional instinct kicked in when a mistake was made as he heard the officers debating arrest codes that were evidently as misplaced as their authority in this context. The explosive revelation. A badge quietly slipped from his pocket as the officer roughly rolled him over, brought the first spark of acknowledgement into the chaos. A switch flipped with an understated snick in the air, not unlike a trigger. "I'm David Marshall, FBI," he said, his voice laced with cold, controlled power, a steel cage against which their prejudice crashed impotently. The officers froze, their calculated demeanor breaking in a heartbeat's prickling silence. Echoes of disbelief, then palpable tension, shifted to them, from stunned beachgoers to guilty law enforcement, and thus a defining snapshot, a moment, grotesque yet clarifying, was imprinted upon the consciousness of those gathered, fixing them to this narrative unfolding under the sun: a family wrongly accused, a profession rendered powerless by the salience of skin. Why? Malik's quiet question hung heavily, more potent than any protest. His hand clutched his father's arm, seeking the man he always thought invincible. David's heart broke a little more, knowing this day had shattered another piece of his children's innocence, even within the embrace of parental protection. As the officers scrambled to untangle their assault on justice, a singular truth remained, one that would not be erased by apologies or misunderstanding. The illusion of ignorance was exposed under the sun's searing revelation, but the damage, oh, that damage, was real. A quiet sat heavily over the Marshall family as they gathered their belongings from the beachside, each shaken in their own way by the encounter. The pounding of the surf seemed muted, eclipsed by the silent roar of the injustice they had just endured. David Marshall walked ahead, his mind replaying the recent scene on an endless loop. The weight of his badge felt unusually heavy in his pocket. The very symbol of justice and protection had proved meaningless in the face of ignorance and bias. His footsteps slowed as the implications of what happened began to settle into his bones, the anger still thrumming like a taut wire beneath his skin. He was an FBI agent, trained to face threats and challenges, to be the pillar of strength his family looked to for safety. Yet on that stretch of beach, surrounded by onlookers and captured by intrusive smartphone cameras, his authority had slipped. No badge, no title, nor legal jargon impressed upon those officers their mistake until it was almost too late. Instead, it took a simple declaration of status to halt their advances. But why should that have been necessary? "David," Jocelyn called softly, breaking through his introspection. Her eyes, though tired, held a fierce determination. "We have to do something. We can't just let this go. We owe it to our kids, to everyone." David's silence was contemplative, an acquiescent nod, barely perceptible except to her watchful eyes. "I know," he replied, his voice a low rumble tinged with grit. The situation had been volatile and unexpectedly public. It required careful handling. Any response must be measured, considering the potentially explosive public and legal implications. "What will you do, Dad?" Malik's question pierced the introspective bubble. Older beyond his years, forced by the day's events into an unwanted maturity, David crouched to meet his son's gaze, the father and his child wrapped momentarily in a world apart from reality's harshness. "Malik, there are times you speak with your voice, and there are times you speak through your action. We've seen what words can do today. Now we need to show what action looks like." The drive back to their vacation rental was tense. Each family member cocooned in their thoughts. David's mind mapped out potential strategies, drawing from his background to consider angles and consequences. At the same time, the family's unity was palpable, a fortress against the unfairness that had been thrust upon them all. Returning home, David made several calls, each conversation signaling a different ring of the power structures he aimed to shake. His network of colleagues, while complex and often bureaucratic, represented allies across the spectrum. People of influence who could translate the incident into substantial outcomes. He knew the battle was uphill. The intersection of justice with racism was fraught with pitfalls for even the most diligently trodden case. Yet this was personal. It was for Jocelyn, Mala, and their younger siblings who would have their faith and fairness tested before they fully understood its importance. His resolve hardened further in the quiet hours, when the children had been tucked into bed and the world was still. Jocelyn sat with him, their unity unspoken but steadfast. Words became redundant. The echoes of the day's events filled their thoughts, leaning into the significance of the challenge they faced ahead, together. It was past midnight when David found himself sitting in the dim glow of his study lamp, the quiet punctuated only by the distant crash of waves, a reminder of the scene that had cast this long shadow. He drafted an official report, each word meticulously chosen to demonstrate the gravity of their experience, calculated to stir a response from the upper echelons of the Bureau and other law enforcement agencies. The report was a powerful weapon in a system often deaf to the cries of the marginalized, but it would initiate a chain reaction. It wasn't merely about them, or that afternoon on the beach. It was about the broader tapestry of racial prejudice that bled into law enforcement. His badge would no longer only denote duty, but also a mandate to dismantle the very sectors of injustice he had sworn to protect from. He ended the report with a statement, a challenge wrapped in a question that dared the reader to act. Are we prepared to defend justice, or are we content to allow prejudice to mask itself as law? Slipping it into its virtual envelope, he sent it off, the digital whoosh, a quiet promise. A silent fury churned into activism as the Marshall family's story began its ripple through the nation. The reaction to the Marshall's ordeal was swift and powerful. In a matter of hours, news outlets caught wind of the incident, their cameras and reporters converging on the small town that had become an unintended stage for this unfolding drama. The headline, "Racist Cops Arrest Black Family on Vacation," appeared in bold across screens and newsstands, sparking a fervor of discussion and debate that crackled like wildfire through social media and mainstream news alike. Video clips captured on phones at the beach were edited into montages, highlighting the absurdity and severity of the situation in crisp detail. Commentators dissected each frame, holding them up as evidence against entrenched racial bias within the police force. The public, galvanized by the mounting tension, didn't mince words in their condemnation. The local news station ran a segment featuring calls from members of the community, their voices suffused with indignation, disbelief, and support for the Marshalls. One caller, a respected local pastor, boomed through the speakers with clarity and conviction. This isn't just an accident or a misunderstanding. It's a plain failure of the justice system that needs confronting. We cannot, in good conscience, stand by while our neighbors, our friends, face something like this. In homes across the town, and much further afield, television screens flickered with faces of protesters holding handmade signs, their messages pointed and blunt. Vacation, not a crime. And stop policing our skin. Swelling numbers gathered over the ensuing days, gathering momentum in their demands for accountability from the police department. Local activists, seasoned veterans of community battles against systemic injustice, found themselves mobilizing quickly and effectively. They held strategy meetings that throbbed with energy and purpose. Youth groups, seniors, churches, and other community organizations banded together to plan marches and rallies, ensuring that the noise of their collective outrage remained unignored. Meanwhile, inside government offices, phones rang incessantly, as public officials were inundated with calls from constituents demanding action. Politicians, sensing the political climate shift and the undeniable public anger, began addressing the situation in statements packed with assurances for accountability and change. The mayor, Rebecca Hughes, took to the podium in a hastily arranged press conference, her voice firm as she delivered her address to the townspeople and those watching across state lines. As a community, we need to acknowledge failings that have brought us to this point. This family, the Marshall family, deserves immediate and thorough transparency into what has occurred. I assure you, there will be no stone left unturned in delivering justice. Against this backdrop of rising action, a more personal scene played out in the Marshall home. The living room became something of a command center, with the family spending time together sorting through emails of support, messages from old friends and strangers, each offering encouragement and solidarity. Jocelyn and David read these words aloud to their children, each message a balm, lifting Malik's spirits and restoring a bit of the trust torn away on that beach. "I'm with you for whatever comes next," Jocelyn said one evening, brushing her hand gently over David's shoulder as they sat side by side reading. Her words, quiet yet steely, carried beyond simple comfort. They were a pact, unbreakable and resolute. David, bolstered by her words, by the outpouring of support, felt a determination swell anew. He understood the power of visible community support, how each gathered protester, each sign, each voice raised in tandem against injustice could frame the narrative, build a pressure that the system, in its rigidity, had to confront. As night fell, and another day of waiting for institutional responses came to a close, a new aspect of their task took form: using the coverage the support, and their story to not only seek justice for themselves, but to push for broader change. Across America, families watched the Marshals' story play out, and for many, it was a call to action, their narratives echoing in unison, demanding a shift that was long overdue. The beach, the badge, and their story had become symbols of a challenge to authority's silence and inertia, and somewhere within, they knew, lay the seeds of genuine transformation. The outcome wasn't yet written, but they had engraved their determination upon its unfolding script, ready for whatever came next. In the weeks following the incident, the Marshals' ordeal transformed from a personal nightmare into a significant symbol of societal reform. David, with the quiet steadfastness of a man used to fighting from within complex systems, took the lead in laying the foundation for legal action. Alongside experienced civil rights attorneys, he and Jocelyn initiated a civil rights lawsuit against the officers and the local police department, focusing national attention on systemic racism embedded within law enforcement. The courtroom became an arena, its air heavy with anticipation and unspoken tension. Reporters crowded outside, jostling to capture quotes and reactions, their camera lenses fixed upon the revolving doors as representatives of the law and of the Marshals entered. The case was not just about a single family or one sun-drenched day gone awry. It was a larger commentary, as broad and deep as the ocean itself, on the contrived fears and unfounded biases tearing at the seams of justice. Sitting in the courtroom, Jocelyn and David exuded a composed exterior. Inwardly, however, the echoes of their unlawful arrest resonated with every word spoken by their legal team. Their attorneys, both passionate advocates for civil rights and versed in battles against institutional injustices, articulated the deep-seated systemic issues, bringing to light various instances where power was misused in harmful ways against the community's minorities. "We are not merely seeking damages for a transgression," their lead attorney, Nina Collins, addressed the court, her voice laced with intent. "We're challenging a pattern, a disregard for human dignity and the constitutional rights meant to protect not only the Marshals but every family who has ever felt the cold edge of unnecessary suspicion." On the other side, flanked by suits crisp and voices clipped, the defense labored to cast doubt, to dissolve communal empathy into questions and false equivalencies. They labeled the officers' conduct as standard procedure, done in mistaken yet good faith, a term that twisted in the air like a poorly thrown punch. David and Jocelyn remained firm, each argument from the opposing side only strengthening their resolve. From different cities and states beyond the small town's borders, other cases began surfacing, each remarkably similar, each calling into further scrutiny the very policies and biases underpinning them. As the proceedings extended over days, community support persisted. Activists filled the gallery seats, meeting each session's close with hushed whispers of analysis and resolve, their presence a constant reminder that while the Marshals were singularly fighting, they were far from alone. Beyond the courtroom, political and social dynamics continued to shift. Several high-profile figures lent their voices and influence to the cause, amplifying its reach. Politicians who weeks before hesitated to align firmly now issued statements of solidarity, either from genuine conviction or political expediency. The difference mattered little to the Marshals, who understood that every voice added pressure to the lever of change. The constraints of the courtroom provided David a stage that differed from the fieldwork and duties he was accustomed to, but aligned with a deeper mission he had quietly honored through his career. His background as a law enforcer became paradoxical armor, offering a unique perspective and unassailable testimony. The lawyers used his deposition strategically, leveraging it to a deadly point, showcasing the irony of how authority perceived him vastly differed based on context, not credentials. With each day, the case gained complexity, but simultaneously brought clarity, a shared understanding crystallizing both in its narrow legal confines and its broad social echo. The lawsuit was not just about tangible reparation, but also intangible reconciliation, casting a light on abstractions of equity that had remained tenuous promises until now. As the midpoint of the trial approached, rumors of settlement discussions began to circulate. The tension heightened, Media outlets speculated on outcomes, with pundits weighing the possibilities of resolution and the precedent it might set. David and Jocelyn sat with their legal team, pondering both their options and the ripples of each potential choice. In the adjoining room, Jocelyn spoke softly. "It's about more than us now, isn't it? It's about what this story can change." Her voice was resolute, a powerful codex for justice echoing within the walls that had held too many silent cries. The deadline for a potential settlement loomed, a beacon signaling a pivotal moment. The choice would reflect not only their personal journey, but an unyielding call for systemic accountability. And through it all, the family understood the weight of their stance imprinted upon the desires for justice, a chance to align realities closer to the ideal they fought to embody. The next steps promised a terrain unlike any battle they'd prepared for, closing their paths with the wider journey that awaited those following. The courtroom proceedings entwined them in a legacy of struggle and transformation, a beacon that began with humiliation but promised to end with the rejuvenation of hope. And for that, they steeled themselves anew. The political response to the Marshall story was as swift as it was calculated. In the tangled corridors of state and federal government, voices that had once whispered now amplified into bold declarations, eager to harness the momentum for accountability. Among these voices, Senator Lisa Harding emerged as a formidable ally. A staunch advocate for civil liberties, she had made headlines with previous crusades against systemic injustice. Her presence added significant weight to the growing pressure on the police department and local government to not only apologize, but to enact substantial reforms. Harding saw the potential in the Marshall's case, a catalyst for the overdue reforms she had championed throughout her career. Before cameras and microphones at a packed news conference in Capitol Hill, Harding delivered a speech that would be replayed countless times on news networks and shared across online platforms. "The injustice faced by the Marshall family is not an isolated incident," she declared, her voice resonating through the packed room. "It is emblematic of a broader, systemic issue that demands our urgent attention and action. We can no longer afford to maintain a status quo that tolerates such acts under the guise of protocol." Her words, imbued with both gravity and determination, resonated powerfully among her peers, some of whom hesitated to take a definitive stand until pushed by the glare of public scrutiny. It was clear the tide of public opinion was shifting, growing into a formidable force that could no longer be ignored or placated with platitudes. Within days, Harding introduced a bipartisan bill addressing unlawful racial profiling by law enforcement officers. The bill aimed to establish comprehensive guidelines for police conduct, increased accountability through mandatory racial bias training, and included measures for an independent review of complaints against police officers. It proposed the establishment of an oversight committee with independent powers to investigate and recommend disciplinary action against officers found guilty of misconduct. The proposed legislation acted as a lightning rod, drawing sharp, focused attention from across the political spectrum. Some saw it as an overdue course correction, the necessary evolution of policing practices in the new century. Others bristled at the implications it held for traditional structures of authority and power dynamics within law enforcement. Back in the Marshall household, the news of Senator Harding's strong support bolstered spirits. David and Jocelyn watched her speech on a broadcast that evening, sharing a moment of silent solidarity as they felt the swell of national momentum finally aligning with their personal struggle. "This could change everything, couldn't it?" Malik, their eldest, spoke up from the corner of the room, his eyes fixed on the screen displaying the charismatic senator. David nodded, the resolve resurfacing in his quiet voice. "It might, son. It just might." The lawsuit they had initiated was no longer a singular path to justice. It had evolved into a broader battleground for systemic change, intersecting political, social, and judicial landscapes. For the Marshalls, what began as a deeply personal ordeal had unfurled into a collective endeavor, an opportunity to contribute to a legacy of reform they had long desired but never envisioned spearheading themselves. Meanwhile, the bill made rapid progress through the Senate, moving from committee discussion to the floor debates. Advocates for civil rights and community leaders rallied in support, their combined voices echoing across digital platforms, skillfully mobilizing public opinion to press legislators to see the bill through to its passage. This support was echoed in towns and cities far beyond the Marshall's seaside incident, as discussions sparked in community halls and across dinner tables, bringing to the forefront a choreography of reform that highlighted the importance of each individual voice within a collective call for justice. Across the nation, similar stories of injustice and discrimination found platforms as the Marshall's experience shed light on the shared narrative endured by many. Discussions about race and systemic bias, previously relegated to marginalized spaces and conditions of discomfort, stepped boldly into the mainstream, prompting reflection and reevaluation at personal and institutional levels. The Marshall family's involvement lent authenticity to the discourse, as their personal journey intertwined seamlessly with emergent policy discussions on the national stage. This was not simply theirs anymore, but a shared struggle transcending race and creed. Their experience resonated, resonance that demanded change. As plans for the bill's presentation drew nearer, anticipation loomed heavy, a tapestry woven from hope, determination, and a measure of fear, the fear of reforms undone, promises forgotten. Yet the Marshalls remained emboldened, a signal amid the noise of legislative and public response, ready to pivot to whatever measures the path of reform required next. The culmination of efforts hinted at movement beyond rhetoric, a callous refusal to repeat the mistakes that led them here. As David noted in yet another interview, it's about ensuring beneath every badge lies not only law but justice, unequivocally paired. A heartfelt wish that in another world, on another beach, confrontation would be unnecessary, each wave carrying not memories of humiliation but tranquility and shared understanding, a testament to progress and perpetuity. The atmosphere at the dinner table was unusually tense, the usual clatter of forks against plates accompanied by a heavy silence. The events of the past weeks loomed large, casting long shadows across the otherwise cozy setting. Each family member dealt with it differently. Jocelyn remained resolute, David reflective, and the children awash in feelings they couldn't yet fully articulate. Dinner conversations, once laced with mundane stories of daily life, academic achievements, and playful sibling banter, now revolved around discussions layered with the weight of adult issues. The events had thrust everyone, even those who weren't ready, into a maturity fast forward. "Why do people hate us?" Karam, the youngest, voiced suddenly. His fork paused midway to his mouth. His question was innocent yet piercing, cutting through to the heart of the issue with a simplicity only a child could manage. Jocelyn placed a gentle hand over Karim's. "It's not everyone, honey," she reassured, though she knew the difficulty in explaining something that felt so vast. "It's complicated, but not everyone lets fear or ignorance guide them." David took over, sensing Jocelyn's struggle to find the suitable words. "Some people hate because they don't understand, or they're scared of things that are different," he added, trying to distill the complex realities of prejudice into something digestible. Malik's scoff was soft, but it carried the edge of teenage skepticism. "Yeah, and we're supposed to just forgive and move on?" His question hung awkwardly in the air, the silence punctuating his frustration. "No, Malik," David replied, his gaze meeting his son's fiery eyes. "Forgiveness is important, but that doesn't mean we don't fight for what's right. You see, acknowledging that it's wrong is the first step, and standing up like we are is how we start to change things." Malik's jaw tightened, a mix of defiance and confusion furrowing his brow. He was old enough to understand the complexities, yet young enough to crave clearer answers. The experience on the beach had rudely awakened him to a world he could no longer look at through an idealistic lens of simple justice. "I just don't get how showing your badge made them stop," Malik continued. "Why not just respect us like any other family? Seems crazy we had to pull rank to get there." Jocelyn intervened, her voice layered with that gentle firmness only mothers could exert. "It's not fair, love. What happened was wrong, but showing the badge was about forcing them to see beyond their assumptions. something they should have done in the first place. She cast a knowing glance at David, whose nod confirmed this shared understanding. It was the same understanding that wove through their household discussions late into the evenings, the terrible resilience needed to navigate a world where assumptions prevailed over identity. The dinner continued, the air gradually lightening as Jocelyn shifted the conversation to more typical subjects. Malik's school project, Kareem's upcoming soccer game. The family's resilience shone through these moments, finding semblances of normalcy amid the chaos. Yet this new normal was irrevocably altered. Every word, every laugh, underscored by the knowledge their family had entered a wider narrative of necessary resistance. Their story, etched into the national consciousness, would continue to ripple outward in waves, each conversation helping to reshape the world slightly closer to the one they believed collective justice could build. As the evening progressed, the weight lessened, but never vanished completely, settling instead into a subtle determination. It was no longer just a discussion of anger and sorrow, but plans and hopes for change. David and Jocelyn knew they were imparting vital lessons to their children about strength, courage, and the importance of standing for what was right, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. When dinner concluded and the table cleared, Jocelyn drew David and the boys into a brief embrace. It was a simple gesture, but a binding one. "Remember, we're going to see this through," she said, her words imbued with promise. As each member retreated to their individual pondering, they knew the fight wasn't merely unfolding on personal grounds, but served as an enduring testament to the courage held within confronting prejudice together. This togetherness would be both their shield and spear. Within it lay a synthesis of love and action, a fierce determination to transform adversity into advocacy. Family conversations now scripted a better tomorrow, one crafted with cautious optimism and a tenacious belief in eventual justice. The national media latched onto the Marshall case with fervor reminiscent of a compelling drama, spotlighting it as a potent symbol in the ongoing battle against racial injustice. Major networks queued up to broadcast the unfolding events, each segment saturating the airwaves with a narrative woven from both the Marshalls' deeply personal experience and the broader implications of systemic racism. News anchors, seated behind gleaming desks, presented the clip of the beach arrest with somber gravitas. The footage, stripped of ambient sounds, left the arrest's raw aggression to speak volumes. Commentators dissected the scenario with fervent intensity, providing context that transcended the immediate elements of the case and delving into the entrenched societal issues at its core. Morning talk shows featured live interviews with analysts and social justice advocates alongside guests who had lived through similar experiences. Each voice added layers to the discourse, amplifying the nuanced intersections of race, authority, and accountability. One evening, David sat quietly in the living room, the dim glow of the television juxtaposed against the intensity of the panel discussion unfolding on screen. These discussions, no matter how far-reaching, invariably circled back to the human element, his family's ordeal, which had served as a catalyst for this vital reckoning. Jocelyn joined him, her presence a calming balm as she settled beside him on the couch. Their lawyer, Nina Collins, was present on tonight's panel, her voice carrying across the screen with clarity and passion as she addressed the legal intricacies of their case. "This issue," Nina articulated, her expression unyielding, "transcends any singular instance. It propels us to reconsider and reshape what accountability in law enforcement truly means. The Marshalls' experience is indicative of what minority communities have vocalized for decades: an urgent need for reform that respects humanity before bias." The conversation turned to broader policy implications, the ambitious scope of the newly proposed legislation, and the increased pressure on law enforcement agencies to adapt. Each point was dissected with the gravitas one would reserve for legislative transformation, highlighting the potential for a landmark shift in American justice culture. As the program edged toward conclusion, another guest, a noted civil rights historian, drew parallels between current events and pivotal civil rights movements of the past. "What we're witnessing," he stated, "is a modern-day accountability movement, echoing historic calls for equality. The Marshals' struggle represents a touchstone for change. Much like those courageous voices who came before us, David felt an enduring mixture of pride and solemn responsibility. Jocelyn reached for his hand and he clasped it tightly, their fingers intertwining in silent unity. The world spoke their names, yet the fight was not merely theirs. It belonged to everyone living within similar realities of unjust treatment based on race. After the program ended, Malik joined them, resting one arm on the couch's back as he reflected on the discussion. "It's everywhere now, isn't it? You think it will actually, change things?" David turned to his son, aware that such a moment, a bridge between personal trials and the potential for widespread change, was rare. "I hope so, Malik. It has to. Sometimes change starts out as whispers, but those whispers, they're turning into roars now. That's how it happens." Malik nodded thoughtfully, his teenage mind grappling with the heavy concept of generational struggles and the promise of change within reach. The media's illumination of their story, he realized, transformed it from an isolated distortion of justice to a beacon drawing attention, empathy, and outrage. Meanwhile, across the country, families gathered around their screens, witnessing the Marshals' journey being parsed across channels and newspapers. The narrative inspired solidarity, embedding within the collective consciousness a reminder that despite seeming divides, these struggles were fundamentally interconnected. For David and Jocelyn, this growing outreach was encouraging. It meant that the public eye could be a catalyst for justice, turning intimate anguish into a rallying point for advocacy. The invitation of media coverage opened doors previously sealed against the private citizens and pushed discussion into domains demanding change. They understood that this was more than a case. It was an opportunity. With each article written, each segment aired, they crafted not only a defense, but a proactive offense, fostering systemic change to prevent other families from facing the same trauma. In the days that followed, media coverage continued to ripple outward, expanding the dialogue and forcing even greater stakeholders in policy, policing, and governance to confront the realized urgencies of reform. David and Jocelyn were not only the subjects of a startling story, but instruments of potential change, leveraging their experience to confront, engage, and ultimately redefine the societal framework they navigated. And as the public call for justice echoed louder, they vowed their voices would never falter. Emboldened by the swelling chorus of unity for justice, amidst the growing media fervor, the Internal Affairs Division of the local police department launched a formal investigation into the officers involved in the Marshals' unlawful arrest. The decision came under considerable public pressure, with accountability demands echoing from community members, activists, and government officials alike. Inside the precinct, the atmosphere shifted from routine to tension-infused scrutiny. Officers moved through their day-to-day tasks with the added weight of an invisible, yet unmistakable, gaze upon them. Squad room conversations, usually filled with banter, became subdued, overshadowed by the looming presence of the inquiry. Captain Ray Carter, tasked with navigating the investigation's complexities, reflected a veneer of professional composure even as the intricate politics of the situation bore down on him. Carter was an experienced officer, well-versed in managing crises but acutely aware of the widening chasm between trust and enforcement his department now faced. He convened a team of internal investigators, ensuring processes were transparent and comprehensive. The directive was explicit: investigate thoroughly, leave no detail unexplored. The stakes were high. The department's integrity was now entwined with the outcomes of these proceedings. Yet beneath the facade of responsibility and diligence, some officers harbored resentment. To them, the Marshals' case and the ensuing scrutiny felt like an external campaign against their fraternity. Officer Derek Mills, one of the officers involved, sat across the sterile expanse of the interview room, facing the glare of his colleagues' questioning. He was a seasoned patrolman, known more for his reliability than any commendations or controversy. Yet now, under the bright fluorescence, His deflective insistence on having followed procedure seemed less convincing. The lead investigator, a dispassionate woman with years of experience reading undercurrents of truth, watched him carefully. "Officer Mills, it's crucial for us to understand all angles of this situation. The actions taken with the Marshall family, did you feel it was necessary to escalate to that extent?" Mills squirmed slightly, maintaining a forced calm. "It was by the book," he replied, defensiveness creeping into his tone despite his attempts at neutrality. "They seemed suspicious. We wanted to make sure everything was in order." Her silence in response was deliberate, expectant. Mills' justification, steeped in implication and assumption, add layers to the complexity of implicit bias, a factor critical in analyzing the circumstance. Yet the man presented an FBI badge. "Did that alter your perception at any point during the incident?" She pressed again, her eyes fixed firmly on his. "That's when we de-escalated," he said, trying to regain control of the narrative spiraling away from him. "Look, I am not a bad cop. We followed the procedures, we were doing our job." Outside the interrogation, Carter monitored the proceedings with steely focus. He recognized the delicate balance this investigation demanded: satisfy public calls for justice while preserving departmental stability. Yet he also knew reform was not only inevitable but necessary, a chance to realign with community trust, precariously teetering on the edge. Simultaneously, the Marshall family was briefed on the investigation's progress by their legal team. Nina Collins kept the family informed, each detail absorbed into their mounting resolve for justice. David still grappled with the duality of his identity, both a victim and a defender of justice. The product of these introspections was a renewed determination to ensure accountability, instill genuine change, marrying the legal, the personal, and the systemic. "They're looking into bias training too," Nina noted during a meeting, pointing to proposed departmental strategies discussed in conjunction with legal repercussion. "It may not seem substantial on its own, but it's a start. We might see genuine steps towards correcting institutional practices." Jocelyn nodded, a mixture of hope tempered by cautious realism. "Will they really make a difference, though?" David's hand closed over hers. "They have to start somewhere, and it's part of rebuilding trust. We hold them to it." Meanwhile, in town meetings and public forums, internal affairs findings awaited conclusion with impatient anticipation. Community leaders, watchdog groups, and everyday citizens speculated, their discussions igniting further fervor for change. Back at the precinct, the investigation reached its zenith as data, findings, and individual testimonies funneled into a narrative demanding public emergence. The department's response, shaped by necessity and influenced by the ongoing political clamor, would pioneer the next phase of action. Internally and externally, the Marshall case progressed beyond isolated actions or heated appraisals. It illuminated the pressing need for accessibility within justice systems, aligning individual accountability with broader reform. As the police department braced for the verdict and comprehensive recommendations, the ripples of the Marshall case promised a catalyst effect. No longer merely a reaction, but a proactive move towards transforming an insidious, long-standing dialogue into a beacon of hopeful resolution. Across the nation, what began as a localized incident propelled by the Marshall family's unjust arrest now ignited a wildfire of protests that burned fiercely from coast to coast. Cities became vibrant canvases of collective outrage, each protest painting a clear and insistent message to unravel the entrenched inequities within law enforcement. Public squares, sprawling parks, and the steps of municipal buildings filled with crowds chanting slogans that resonated into the air, each word a testament to a demand for justice and reform. In New York, Chicago, Atlanta, and Los Angeles, and even smaller towns nestled away from major headlines, people gathered, drawn by a shared experience, unified in voices made resounding by pain and hope. The signs varied, yet each bore allegiances beyond words. "Justice for the Marshalls," proclaimed one, a straightforward yet profound encapsulation of a narrative that transcended their singular plight. Another read, End racial profiling now, its bold letters cutting starkly across colorful placards. The march of feet became a drumbeat, steady and unyielding, weaving through streets burgeoning with the heat of rhetoric and resolution. The protesters were a tapestry of diversity, reflecting myriad backgrounds and experiences, yet bound by a common purpose. University students, fueled by fresh ideals and fierce determination, mingled with seasoned activists who bore historical scars of previous struggles. Parents, propelled by dreams of a more just world for their children, marched alongside elders who had fought in older battles. The unity of intent bridged generational divides, each participant a vital thread in this tapestry of resistance. Amidst the sea of people, community leaders emerged, voices seasoned through advocacy, magnified by megaphones, cajoling, encouraging, and rallying the spirits of those assembled. Among them stood familiar figures, echoes from prominent civil rights movements, vernacular artifacts of an unyielding promise to see justice delivered and preserved. In Washington, D.C., an impromptu camp was set at the foot of the iconic Lincoln Memorial, the symbolism striking and purposeful, a pilgrimage of sorts for justice seekers. Human chains extended beneath emblazoned banners, linked arms testament to solidarity, each tie drawing strength from resistance, echoed through decades past. On stages hastily erected from truck beds, activists and speakers, some poets at heart, filled the air with words flowing in cadence, some gentle yet direct. When history confines our stories to the quiet corners of textbooks, an impassioned orator declared, let it also remember the Marshall family, a story written not in the ink of defeat, but in the indomitable voice of change. The media, previously a lens fixed on scandal and spectacle, was swept into the chorus of emotion running like an undercurrent through the protests. Journalists, cameras poised and live feeds streaming, relayed this mosaic of movement, a testament and challenge to power structures beyond their reach. And in the Marshall household, emotions intertwined with the cadence of the march. Though grounded by the burden of being its unwilling nucleus, they were buoyed by the people's support, a manifestation of the changes they tirelessly pursued. Jocelyn, watching the live coverage, understood this broader movement was intimately tied to their present journey. "David," Jocelyn said, drawing him close as they watched the steady march on the screen, "look at this. All of those people," her voice lingered on the cusp of disbelief and pride. David nodded, reflecting on the weight of their burden, now diffused into the collective strength of multitudes. They're marching for more than just our case. They're walking for every injustice that's been swept aside. It's incredible. Malik, taking in the scenes with wide eyes, felt a burgeoning sense of identity beyond his immediate world, a connection to something vast and communal. "I didn't know so many people cared," he admitted, the realization refracting through a lens of newfound hope. Behind the marches were narratives that intersected with the Marshals' own, a story not singular in isolation but woven into the voices echoing across city streets, thrust into a continuum that refused erasure. And while change would never come as swiftly as the push against injustice demanded, this newfound momentum signaled a culture awakened, a wave breaking over the shores of indifference with renewed, resounding force. As protests continued, voices resonated together, preparing for the legislative challenges that lay ahead. Each step took them closer, a reminder of the enduring power they sowed into communal action, turning isolation into collective strength and foreshadowing a society bearing the indelible mark of reformation, shackled no longer to ignorance. With persistent resolve they marched on, an unwavering procession daring history to record not only the struggle, but the enduring promise of progress. Back at home, the Marshall children faced their own struggles, particularly as the buzz surrounding their family's case began to permeate school hallways and social circles. The story had spread beyond the TV screens and newspaper headlines, weaving itself into conversations and creating waves that seeped into every facet of their young lives. In the classroom, Malik and his siblings encountered the unyielding gaze of curiosity, pity, and, at times, prejudice. While some teachers addressed the topic with sensitivity, using it as a starting point for vital yet often uncomfortable discussions on race and justice. Others either ignored it altogether or approached it with hesitancy that stifled meaningful discourse. During lunch one afternoon, Malik sat at his usual table, a mix of friends surrounding him. The chatter of school drama and daily life filled the air until a sudden lull descended as the latest headline involving the marshals flashed on the cafeteria's mounted screen. "Hey, Malik," his friend Jordan ventured cautiously, "how you doing with all that's happening?" Malik, usually composed, felt the usual confidence waver under the collective attention. "I'm okay," he replied, trying to suppress the mixture of emotions bubbling beneath the surface. Another voice piped up. "Do your parents really think they'll change anything?" The question, innocent but pointed, sharpened the atmosphere. Malik paused, grappling with thoughts worn heavy by the burden of expectation. "Yeah, they think they will. I think they will. This is more than just about us now." Jordan nodded, the somber acknowledgement of youthful idealism meeting the complexities of systemic resistance. "It's pretty brave what your family's doing, but it's also kinda scary, right?" "Yeah," Malik admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. His usual bravado was overshadowed by the gravity of their situation, feelings of anxiety melding into the resolve to support his family's fight. At a nearby table, whispers spread quiet yet potent in their assumptions. Malik caught snippets, fragments of ignorance and prejudice that turned sharply against the prevailing narrative of support. One whisper rose above the rest, tinged with a complacent disdain. "I bet they're just doing it for attention. Bet nothing's gonna change anyway." Malik stared into his tray, the words stoking a quiet flame within. The echo of doubts and denials lingered like a stubborn shadow, but his thoughts lent him armor, a reminder of the deeper truth, beyond perfunctory dismissals. "Hey," Jordan interrupted, seeing Malik's internal struggle reflected in his gaze, "forget them. You guys are actually making people talk about it. That's something." Malik nodded, grateful for the lifeline, albeit unable to disentangle the complexities of his world now spun anew. Each smile, each encouragement, balanced by its antithesis, creating a volatile mix that challenged perception yet offered a glimpse beyond the limitations of understanding. Round him, the cafeteria resumed its hum, the usual patterns resettling into focus as students, teachers, and staff returned to their routines. Yet Malik carried the awareness that their family's story was not just etched into media, but into each passing day. His identity intertwined with societal shifts, brewed far from his immediate grasp. In the halls, Kareem and his classmates faced similar probing, an awkward analysis from children whose understanding was mere fragments pieced together from overheard conversations and parental interpretations. "Kareem, does it mean your dad can arrest lots of bad people now?" one boy asked, his question an intersection of hero worship and naive misconception. "Not exactly," Kareem replied. "He's trying to show that they are wrong for acting like that in the first place." The answer satisfied his peers minimally, their focus shifting back to the play of recess. Still, Kareem understood that beyond games and laughter lay a world demanding attention, one where his family's circumstances colored interactions with complexity unsuited to typical grade school simplicity. For the Marshall children, school became another battlefield for identity and change, their family's experience an undefined curriculum and tolerance clashing against ignorance. Yet it was also an opportunity, a chance to reshape narratives, to lend truth to actions taken and words spoken. As Malik, Karen, and their siblings returned each day, education extended beyond textbooks, encompassing a call to define and reshape the very conditions of their learning and existence. The Marshall children returned home each day, their stories woven into a larger tapestry their parents crafted with courage and determined hands. At dinner, as they recounted the day's events, their voices threaded unity through conversation, a family embracing the uncertainties of tomorrow, pulled by roots deepened in justice-seeking, unwavering truth, amid the dissonance of adolescence and societal change. In classrooms and hallways, the echoes of resistance grew steady, youthful minds burgeoning with critical thinking, dialogue faltering but determined, opening up possibilities for futures shaped by empathetic awareness and an unwavering conviction. Change, though slow and fraught with opposition, would eventually prevail. In a small, sterile room lined with tiles and fluorescent lights, Officer Derek Mills sat opposite a poised and resolute interviewer. This was his chance, a calculated attempt to salvage his reputation amidst the storm that had engulfed the department and threatened to tarnish his record irreparably. His statement would be crucial, not just in defense of his actions during the arrest, but in his attempt to rationalize the broader implications of that day on the beat. A camera perched unsettlingly in the corner, a silent witness to everything that would unfold here, every word, pause, and hesitance captured in stark clarity. Mills cleared his throat, his mind racing to frame his narrative. "I didn't mean for it to happen the way it did," he began, choosing his words carefully. "This wasn't about race. Never was. It was more about ensuring safety and following protocol." The interviewer regarded him with a penetrating stare that withered soft excuses into silence. "The decision to escalate was yours alone, Officer Mills. Can you explain the reasoning behind that escalation, given that the marshals weren't posing any evident threat?" "Well," Mills hesitated, reaching for veracity amid a tangle of self-preservation. "It was instinctive. When you're in that moment, sometimes we're trained to act first and question later. Tactically sound, perhaps, but your actions were not objectively justified in this case, were they?" Mills shifted, the weight of reflection settling momentarily upon him. "Maybe not in hindsight," he admitted, the acknowledgement sitting bitterly on his tongue, "but you don't always see the whole picture in the heat of the moment." "Or perhaps," the interviewer interjected, unfazed by his equivocations, "seeing only some parts too clearly rather than the whole." The silence brimmed with the implications. Mills felt the walls close in around him, the reality that he was just one player in a larger, more complex issue of systemic biases. His role, though singular, was symptomatic of a deeply ingrained cultural problem within the force, a problem that defied simple rationalization or contrition. "Have you considered the impact of this incident on the individuals involved, particularly the children?" the interviewer pressed. Mills' gaze fell as the weight of his decisions pressed down upon him heavier than before. He hadn't meant for children to be involved, not consciously at least, and the thought of their fear and confusion stilled him for a moment. "I don't want anyone to think I'm heartless," he muttered. "I'm just doing my job, as I was trained to do." "But isn't part of that job ensuring your actions don't perpetuate harm or fear on those who are innocent?" Mills's silence now stretched longer, filling the space between his past justifications and the unnerving clarity piercing through his conditioned defenses. "I suppose it means thinking more, being better." The tremor in his words reflected a flickering awareness of remorse, perhaps the beginning of reflection, his lone attempt to reconcile what had happened with the man he wanted to be once the interrogations ceased and external judgments passed. "Officer Mills, we have to navigate these complexities with understanding and accountability," the interviewer concluded, closing her notepad with a marked finality. "Real change requires that navigation, both personal and systemic. This situation is bigger than both of us, uniting perspectives toward an equitable future." He nodded, a quiet acceptance settling over him. Statements captured, analyses articulated, but the officer remained a small cog within a vastly overbearing machinery, one in sore need of intricate mending. As Mills left the room, the shadows of a broader inquiry followed. The questions he faced mirrored the inward evaluations posed across police departments nationally, where scales of justice weighed critically in the balance against biases that persisted beneath enforced decorum. The sincerity within Mills's statement was irrelevant to systemic accountability, now subject to layers of investigation and consequence still unfolding beyond these walls. The interview's transcript would join others in crafting an overarching narrative demanding actionable redress, a narrative seeking not only to correct but redefine a landscape scarred by institutionalized prejudice. And across town, within the Marshall household, they watched news segments recounting the proceedings. For David and Jocelyn, the admission was heard with mixed emotions, tempered by hope for systemic recognition and change, but cautious optimism lacing their actions. While individual apologies offered no immediate solace, they contributed incremental steps toward acknowledging how deeply these prejudices rooted themselves within assumed protocols. Watching from their living room, the Marshalls understood the complexity of progress, mirrored imperfectly in gestures like Mill's expressions trapped within individual realizations calling for a collective response. Still, they were committed to their path, understanding that what lay beyond this inquiry transcended singular admissions, aiming instead to dismantle entire constructs and redefine justice, a final chapter yet unwritten, but rife with potential for transformation. In the shadowy corridors of the police department, Officer Alex Ramirez sat cloaked in internal conflict, silently contemplating the integrity of his uniform. Witness to the arrest on the beach, his moral compass had guided him only so far, before the unwritten code of silence among officers bound his actions. But as the tides of justice swelled in the wake of the Marshal's story, he found himself on the precipice of a decision that would challenge everything he had understood about loyalty and duty. Ramirez was a young officer, still finding his footing in a career fraught with complexities he hadn't fully grasped when he first put on the badge. The events on the beach had gnawed at him since the moment they occurred, and he'd seen fear all too clearly in the eyes of the children, a haunting mirror of misunderstanding and authority abused. Now, in this turning point, he realized he could no longer remain complicit through silence. It was on an overcast afternoon, the cityscape subdued by a muted sun, that Ramirez approached the office of Captain Ray Carter. Nervous energy coursed through him, a mixture of fear, determination, and the weight of what would surely be a pivotal moment in his career. Carter glanced up from his desk as Ramirez entered, beckoning him to sit without preamble. He had seen the younger officers circling decisions before, a trait Ramirez inherited from his earnest pursuit of principle over complacency. "What's on your mind, Ramirez?" Carter asked, his tone direct, laced with understanding that this informal meeting held substantial weight. Ramirez took a breath, each word calculated to bridge moral conviction with professional reality. "Captain, I feel compelled to speak about the incident with the Marshall family. I was there watching it unfold, and, well, I think I need to testify about what I saw." "Testify?" Carter repeated, setting aside his pen with quiet deliberation. "You know that speaking out will not come without its consequences, both among your peers and for your career. Are you certain about this?" Ramirez nodded, a resolve chiseling away the apprehension clouding his thoughts. "I am, sir. It wasn't right what happened. I can't in good conscience keep silent." Carter considered the young officer, the conflict reflected in his gaze resonating with the ideals he once carried as a rookie. He leaned back, intertwining his fingers thoughtfully. "You realize what this might entail? For yourself, for your station?" "I do." Ramirez's voice was firm, coated with an unyielding truth. "But the Marshalls deserve the truth to be heard. Our community deserves trust in the system that's meant to protect them." The air between them crackled with the implications of his words. Carter saw in Ramirez a fracture between departmental loyalty and overarching justice, a blend of dissonance and hope. It would unsettle the tenuous balances within, but ignite fires for reform far beyond paper policies. "All right, Ramirez," Carter agreed finally, a discernible respect edging his assent. "You will have to prepare a statement, and this will make its way to the committee reviewing the case. I'll ensure your side is heard." As Ramirez left the office, a burdened anxiety temporarily lifted, but he understood his actions would ripple through the placid veneer of order and command into wider currents of institutional flux. Several days later, with nerves tempered by conviction, Ramirez sat before an official panel tasked with examining the arrest and actions taken. Here, among the committee members, questions cut through administrative fog with precision, demanding clarity. His heartbeat thrummed beneath his uniform as he spoke unadorned truth, rolling into the silence of expectation. "I witnessed hesitation and assumptions that should never have been made by officers trained to assess without prejudice," Ramirez declared, his voice brokering no order of denial or justification that had previously shadowed testimonials. "As a law enforcement officer, I am compelled to speak up, No minor mistakes bear consequence equal to breaching public trust, his statement echoed in the austere room, each admission a fracture in the larger construct seeking reevaluation and redress. The ramifications of speaking out echoed beyond him, sowing seeds of necessary change amid the whispered acknowledgement of inherent biases within policing. Ramirez emerged from the panel room, shoulders paradoxically burdened and relieved. News of his testimony spread fast, reaching the ears of community leaders and media outlets with fervid interest. Where the uniform implied silent compliance, his voice, surging now through institutional channels, navigated the reawakening context of accountability. Within the Marshall residence, the news of Ramirez's testimony arrived like much-needed rain following drought. David and Jocelyn listened to the report with renewed hope that fairness could flourish within a rigid system, lining dark clouds with the silver possibilities of transformation. This single act from within was a line cast into profound depths, reaching beyond departmental silence and offering a beacon that swore commitment to honesty over misplaced loyalty. As Ramirez's voice joined others rising above deep systemic waters, the call for justice became persistent, illuminating pathways toward redemption and restructuring. And as questions demanded answers, the truth, once buried, began its journey to the surface, a necessary rekindling of faith in justice's promise to all. The courtroom was a charged tapestry of anticipation, its atmosphere thick with the gravity of proceedings that had captured national attention. Today, it would witness a pivotal hearing in the Marshall's civil rights lawsuit, a day that promised intense scrutiny and, perhaps, a swing of the pendulum toward justice. The spectators' gallery buzzed with a mix of civil rights activists, media personnel, and members of the public whose identities converged into a collective curiosity for justice or a penchant for spectacle. The Marshalls sat together, their presence a force of calm determination amidst the swirl of legal maneuvering and public discourse. David Marshall's frame was one of stoic resolve as he sat beside Jocelyn, whose face reflected a composed confidence tempered by the undercurrent of tension. This day was both a testament to their endurance and a bridge to possible reconciliation with a system that had historically excluded voices like theirs from its halls of equity. On the other side of the courtroom, counsel for the police department prepared their defense, submitting arguments steeped in procedural defenses and justifications that, to them, constituted standard practice. The judge, a seasoned arbiter with an air of no-nonsense pragmatism, entered, bringing the room to a hushed attentiveness. As proceedings began, legal arguments ricocheted with precision and restraint, each side presenting narratives underpinned by diverging interpretations of justice. Nina Collins, the Marshall's attorney, possessed a presence that was both commanding and empathic. Her voice cut through the room with clarity as she addressed the panel. This case isn't merely about a single event on a beach. It's about a pattern of discrimination entrenched within law enforcement. It's about a family whose narratives exemplify systemic flaws demanding redress, not solely for their sake, but for everyone impacted by policies that disproportionately target communities of color. Nina's words resonated deep within those assembled, her argument emphasizing personal testimony and broader societal urge. She motioned toward David, inviting his testimony to set the stage for first-hand examination of the day's events. David took the stand with the measured air of someone who understood the importance of voice, a testimony that transcended facts, steeped in personal truth and lived history. Emotion rippled below the surface as he recounted the arrest, his narrative unraveling with poignant detail. Like countless families on that beach, we were there to enjoy a vacation until we became targets of an error that shouldn't have occurred, he testified. That day was about assumptions we couldn't alter, despite every reasoned action taken. Despite presenting my credentials, everything of truth lay masked beneath one's broader prejudice. His voice didn't waver, though the words bore the brunt of long-held reflections, fused with the weight of unexpected vulnerability before the court. Justice, in its truest form, is not merely the absence of unfairness, It is the presence of equality. Across the courtroom, the defense attempted to dismantle these assertions, relying heavily on law enforcement protocols intended to provide justification for actions taken during the incident. Their strategy hinged on deconstructing the implications of racial bias, shifting focus onto perceived threats and due process under standard operational methods. But as the day's proceedings continued, the cumulative weight of evidence and testimony fostered an undeniable shift. Witnesses for the marshals, including Officer Ramirez, who had previously testified against his colleagues, brought forth articulations of systemic observations that contoured the broader discourse with critical insight. Ramirez, taking the stand with a steady gaze, reiterated his observations candidly. Those involved were quick to react based on bias. They never saw a family enjoying a day at the beach, just a perceived threat because of preconceived notions. It's a reality that's sadly all too common, and it's a reality that needs mending. The court absorbed his words, each testimony building layers upon instances of misuse, with clarity demanding introspection from all present. Each line spoken committed to course correction, a pursuit of justice needing resolute decision-making. The session continued with fervor. Late into the day, arguments cascading into a synthesis of clashing ideals and a yearning for harmony. As the court adjourned for the day, the gavel's echo signaled not closure, but continuations and hoped-for reckonings waiting beyond these walls. With proceedings paused and the air full of expectation, those within the gallery gradually filed out, each step resonant with a mixture of hope and reflection. For the marshals, the day was a marathon of courage, a necessary segue toward a larger resolution that promised more than simple verdict. It promised recognition, growth, and the potential reformation of institutions. Outside, the Marshall family stood framed by curious onlookers and press itching for comments, their silhouettes casting elongated promises of forthrightness and dignity upon the courthouse steps. "What happens now, Dad?" Malik asked, reflecting youthful curiosity, but wearing the mantle of youthful wisdom. "We keep pushing," David replied, his tone unfettered by exhaustion. "We follow it through to the end. This is bigger than us now, Malik." This understanding, carved within the collective experiences of the day, accompanied each family member home. The future beckoned with both inquiry and assurance, a path waiting to be navigated by principled resilience, determined to redefine justice's scope as both a promise and practice. Outside the courthouse, a gathering of people awaited the end of the day's proceedings. The crowd was a vivid tapestry of supporters, activists, and curious onlookers, their faces reflecting hope and determination interlaced with the fatigue of persistent struggle. As the marshals emerged, sunlight slanting across the courthouse steps highlighted the gravity of their presence in this ongoing fight. The media throng surged forward, microphones thrust into the scorching air like earnest flowers reaching towards sunlight. Questions cascaded in a discordant chorus, eager to seize the narrative embroiled in the Marshall family's indefatigable resilience. "Mr. Marshall, do you believe today's testimony will tip the scales in your favor?" one reporter asked, urgency threading her voice. David paused, allowing the question to resonate within the gathering throng before responding. "This isn't solely about favor, it's about the truth," he said, his voice firm yet laden with the compassion that underlined each public appearance. "What we strive for isn't just personal justice. It's a wider recognition of an implicit truth many experience, but too few see action against." The crowd animated in response to his measured optimism, ready to seize this moment as another step toward dismantling the structures long skewed against equitable justice. Meanwhile, Jocelyn, aware of the public's diversity, approached with her characteristic warmth, an aura of solidarity extending beyond physical proximity. "We are so grateful for all your support," Jocelyn addressed the assembled families, individuals, and activists. "This fight is bigger than any single family. It's about creating a place where everyone feels safe, respected, and heard." From the fringes of the crowd, dissent echoed, a small group vocalizing skepticism, and their remarks punctuated the air with sharp, sporadic misgivings. "Do you think you can really change the system?" one voice challenged. Jocelyn turned, her gaze soft, yet carrying the steely intent that had come to define their public engagements. "Change doesn't come because it's easy or guaranteed," she replied eloquently. "It comes because we refuse to accept anything less than what is just and right for us and for those who will come after." The interplay between supportive acclamations and doubt resonated within the onlooker's psyche, underscoring the complexities of public opinion navigating transformative social change. In their assembly, perspectives diverged, revealing fractures of a broader national dialogue yet to be harmonized. As the marshals prepared to leave, a spontaneous chant ignited among the supporters, a plethora of voices echoing calls for justice that transcended geographical distances, threading through streets, homes, and the hearts of those willing changemakers. Later that evening, in households across America, debates and conversations ignited anew as people reflected on the day's developments and crystallized incidents reframed before their eyes. Families gathered around tables and televisions, dissecting the implications steered forth by a case large in both heart and scope. Yet beneath these surface observations lay the undercurrent of divisions that continued to polarize perceptions. At a local diner in town, a group of patrons found themselves embroiled in heated discussion, each perspective reflecting broader dialogues that spilled into public consciousness. Two men, each with differing opinions, exchanged arguments over coffee and the fading daylight. "It's all grandstanding," one of them insisted, skepticism etched into every syllable. "Courts don't change things. Look at everything that's come before. People like the marshals are just pushing too hard." His companion shook his head, the rhythms of age yielding both understanding and an enduring hope. "Change never happens neatly," he replied, his voice weathered like old leather. "They press because that's the only way we've seen progress. These stories ain't just about families like the marshals, they're about confronting truths other people look away from." Meanwhile, across town, in community centers and schools, conversations amplified by digital platforms churned with fervor. Social media landscapes burgeoned with exchanges, some hostile but many heavy with solidarity, focused on carving pathways for reform and reconciliation. The Marshall family's trial, once a personal plea, now orchestrated a deepened reckoning with practices long overlooked by institutions focused staunchly on maintaining order rather than achieving justice. It was a balancing act straddling restitution and renewal, aiming not just at singular exoneration but societal restructuring too long delayed. The courtroom would see more of the family's story unraveled, yet each day ushered belonging into a narrative not marked by singularity but emboldened by collectiveness. In their struggles, the marshals mirrored broader human experiences, tessellated battles from lives shared in purpose, defined by resilience. And as daylight receded beyond windowed views, the promise of another dawn hung patiently at the horizon's edge, a testament that justice, though it arrived bending under the burden of history, worked forward, each step directed by unwavering courage, inviting answers inching toward a fragile but brightened future. Within the walls of their home, the Marshall family gathered round the kitchen table, the day's events swirling around them like a gentle yet insistent tide. The heightened emotions of the hearing lingered, yet amidst the residual tension, there was an anchoring resolve that held them together, fortified by love and shared purpose. Jocelyn set out the evening meal, her movements deliberate, infusing each action with comforting normalcy. She paused to catch David's eye, unspoken words of solidarity bridging the silence between them. The children, seated and expectant, bore various expressions, curiosity mixed with concern, tinged with the residual unease of understanding their part within a larger narrative. Malik, ever perceptive and astutely aware of the world beyond his immediate surroundings, spoke first. "Do you think what we're doing is really making a difference?" His question held the weight of youthful sincerity, seeking assurance within the whirlwind of change that tugged at their lives. David placed his utensils down, thoughtful as he addressed his son. "It might not always feel like it, Malik," he began, the truth resonating in each syllable. "But every time we speak out, every moment we push for what's right, we're chiseling away at something bigger than us. It takes time, persistence, but yes, It makes a difference. Jocelyn added, her voice a soothing balm. It's like planting seeds. Sometimes you won't see the growth immediately, but with care and determination, something beautiful emerges. The analogy settled into the room, a quiet understanding emerging between them. Kareem, their youngest, listened intently to the exchange, a silent heart absorbing his role within a story tinged with both innocence and burgeoning awareness. Even when it seems hard, Kareem asked, the simplicity of childhood wondering mingled with newfound realizations. Especially then, Jocelyn affirmed, her hand brushing gently across her son's back. A loving affirmation of his place within their shared journey. That's when it matters most. The conversation ebbed into the harmony of family life, their words weaving through the mundane patterns of dinner as they caught up on the small details otherwise obscured by grander headlines. Each update school projects, backyard games, dreams of a summer respite served to ground them in the here and now, affirming the life they fought diligently to protect and improve. As the evening wore on, the children retreated to their rooms, their imaginations casting shadows in the wake of burgeoning realities. Upstairs, books opened, pens scribbled across pages, painting hopeful futures entwined with expectations and dreams. In the cozy warmth of the living room, David and Jocelyn lingered, their companionship and unspoken dialogue that quilted the day's experiences with optimism and vulnerability. The world outside continued its stir, yet within this intimate setting, they found solace in moments shared away from judicial summons and societal scrutiny. "Do you know what keeps me going?" David asked, drawing Jocelyn into his arms. "It's knowing that we're not just reacting to what's handed to us. We're actively shaping what's next. Not just for our children, but for many families who look to us, hoping for that change." Jocelyn leaned into the embrace, drawing strength from his conviction. "And it's knowing we're not alone. We have so many standing with us," she whispered, her words carrying the glow of mutual determination. Together they embodied resilience, a living testament to the power of unyielding love and truth. Outside, the night wrapped their home in quiet contemplation, stars twinkling against a limitless sky, a celestial vastness reflecting their hope for boundless opportunity intermingled with justice. As shadows grew long and silence enveloped the house, their resolve shimmered with unspoken promise. They had journeyed far from a singular incident to embrace a collective mission, a tapestry anchored in resistance yet embroidered with dreams of a reforged justice. For the Marshalls, each conversation, every embrace, rekindled the endurance required to transform struggle into solidarity and adversity into advocacy, a journey they embarked upon steadfastly together. In the comfort of night's hush, they breathed life into timeless truths, carrying their endeavor for fairness into realms both familiar and uncharted, echoing a promise of progress destined to light tomorrow's uncertain path, one determined step at a time. Within the hallowed halls of the FBI headquarters, whispers of the Marshall case had infiltrated conversations, weaving themselves into the fabric of the Bureau's consciousness. David's decision to confront systemic flaws within both local law enforcement and broader societal constructs had not only thrust his family into the spotlight, but also challenged a fraternity that thrived on unity, duty, and secrecy. In a conference room flooded with morning light filtering through half-closed blinds, a meeting was underway. Around the table sat senior agents, their expressions drawn into varying degrees of concern, skepticism, and reflection. The subject of discussion, David Marshall's role amidst the swirling storm of public attention and the repercussions for their reputation, was as unavoidable as the sunlight tangling through their deliberations. Assistant Director Eleanor Hughes, a woman known for her sharp intellect and unwavering resolve, presided over the gathering. Her presence commanded respect, not only for her depth of experience in the field, but also for her ability to navigate the often convoluted terrain of federal oversight and public accountability. "We need to address the Marshall case with both transparency and sensitivity," Hughes stated, her voice a calibrated melody of authority. "Our reputation as a bureau hinges not just on operations, but on the integrity we demonstrate in confronting systemic issues. whether they arise within our own house or in the agencies we intersect with. Agent Tomlinson, a long-serving member of the Internal Affairs Committee, shifted in his seat, speaking with careful consideration. David Marshall is a dedicated agent. His actions, though atypical for someone in his position, highlight issues that we can't afford to overlook any longer. Exactly. Hughes nodded, nodding towards the potential that lay in this moment of reckoning. Marshall's stance offers us a unique opportunity, an avenue to lead by example, to champion reforms that are not just reactions to public outcry, but reflective of progressive policing values. Silence reigned briefly, each member digesting the implications. The Bureau faced a formidable decision: uphold traditional stances mired in defense and detachment, or embrace change, shaped by those within its ranks braving transparency. The conversation swayed to pragmatic facets, procedural adjustments, potential implications for interagency collaboration, and the impact on public perception. Yet beneath these logistical elements surged an undercurrent of moral reappraisal, demanding introspection from those tasked with enacting justice's most complex dances. In an adjoining office, David himself was ensconced in a quieter setting, reconciling his dual identity, an agent of the Federal Bureau and a central figure in a struggle overtly hostile toward egregious facets of justice. His own reflections were intertwined with the organizational disquiet, yet they remained firmly tethered to his profound belief in principles he could not unravel. A knock on the door pulled him from contemplation. Hughes stood at the threshold, her demeanor confident yet receptive. David gestured for her to join him, a mutual understanding intuitive in their shared ethos of service. "Director Hughes," he acknowledged, a respectful clarity edging his greeting. "David," she began, settling into a chair across from him, "I want you to know that the Bureau stands not only by our agents in times of adversity, but within the truths they illuminate. Your actions in advocating for justice for your family reflect the values we hold, even if they disrupt conventional methods." Her admission hung in the room, melding with shafts of light filtering through symbols of an unveiling comprehension between them. "I appreciate that, Director," David replied, his sincerity unfiltered. "I never sought to make this about more than it was, though I understand how it has become so much more." Their exchange encompassed more than words. It deciphered an unspoken commitment to transforming the role of the agency into one of authenticity, where actions and values aligned without being compromised by historical inertia. "I believe we can use this moment," Hughes continued as the dialogue turned tactical, "to pilot internal reforms, advance training, address biases, and build partnerships with communities in ways that foster trust. You have the experience and the perspective to help shape this endeavor." The proposal resonated deeply within David, an opportunity to carry forward the changes his family had fought for and embed them within institutional ambit. Their discussion aligned on strategy, weaving paths of decisive action embedded with foresight, a blueprint for the Bureau striving to regain its mandate of public trust, buttressed by ethical fidelity. Together, David and Hughes illuminated the potential for transformation from within, crafted by those resilient enough to challenge the very frameworks that had once defined them. The meeting between David and the director marked a turning point, not only for what lay immediately ahead, but for the ember of collaboration kindled from a shared vision, a pact to redefine narrative control so deeply entrenched, embracing the measure of change yet to come. Even as bureaucracy loomed like an ever-present specter, here was the beginning, not an uncontested conclusion, but a promise to dismantle complacency with vigor, aligning purpose with possibility. And as they parted, a current of possibility flowed outward, intent on absorbing the lingering shadows with light, a mutual ascent into reinvention, fortitude sewn into tomorrow's potential fabric. The courtroom's intensity had seeped into every corner of the public discourse, capturing the collective consciousness in ways few legal battles ever did. As proceedings resumed, a palpable sense of anticipation enveloped everyone present, each participant acutely aware that they were witness to a potential turning point in the fight for racial justice. Amid the murmur of voices and the shuffling of papers, Nina Collins prepared to introduce the anonymous evidence, a strategic masterstroke that promised to pierce the facade of routine procedure and lay bare the systemic rot festering in unseen places. The documents offered a damning insight into the preconceived protocols that shaped so many interactions between law enforcement and communities of color. Your Honor, Nina began with a confidence that resonated across the silent courtroom. The documents we present today reveal a systematic pattern of racial profiling and discriminatory practices, not isolated to one incident, but pervasive within the protocols that guide policing practices in this department. She paced slowly, purposefully, her words calm yet forceful. These emails and memos highlight a tacit approval of biased actions under the guise of necessary law enforcement, a betrayal of the very principles that should underpin our justice system. As Nina laid out her argument, one email in particular held the court's rapt attention. Its language was blunt, describing unspoken quotas and pressures to target individuals based on ethnicity rather than behavior. It was a chilling testament to the reality many faced daily, a practice entrenched deep within supposed layers of protection and service. One juror, an older gentleman with a weary yet determined gaze, leaned forward slightly, engrossed by the evidence placed before him, a narrative that was fast dismantling long-held assumptions. Across the courtroom, glances exchanged between legal teams betrayed the shift in momentum, the defense's earlier tactical arguments now weightless against the mounting reality. The defense attorney, realizing the urgent need to regain control, stood to recenter the argument, but found words insufficient against the tidal wave of truth. These documents are only one perspective, he argued, but even as he spoke, the foundation of his position crumbled, the platitudes of protocol rendered hollow by the lived experiences documented within those pages. Nina responded with poised eloquence, her retort a salient reminder that the truth, however painful, was the first and necessary step toward reform. What these documents provide is clarity. Clarity that these actions are not isolated, but rather a systemic failure requiring accountability, recognition, and change. The tension in the courtroom was electric, a symphonic crescendo led by Nina's unwavering command. The judge, a man seasoned by decades on the bench, absorbed the revelations with a critical eye, understanding the weight of what had been disclosed and its implications beyond these hearings. From the gallery, David and Jocelyn watched with hopeful eyes, Malik seated between them, feeling the gravity of this momentous day, a day that concluded not with judgment, but the promise of further deliberation. As the session ended and the court recessed, a surge of communal energy swept through the courthouse halls, discussions igniting amongst all present. Every spectator and participant understood that what had transpired was more than evidentiary. It was the preface to potential transformation, the infusion of justice long unyielding into the rigid frameworks of status quo. Outside, clusters of journalists relayed updates into booming microphones, their reports carried promptly by airwaves into homes nationwide, fanning flames of debate across dinner tables and social media forums alike. Within the Marshall residence, later that evening, the family reflected on the day's revelations. The weight of their journey felt lighter, buoyed by the unseen hands that had aided them and the concrete acknowledgement of their suffering, now manifest in tangible form. "We're doing it," Malik said with wonderment, the boyish timbre in his voice underscored by burgeoning wisdom. "People are finally seeing what's been happening." "Yes," David affirmed, his voice steady with the clarity of conviction. "And this is just the beginning. We're turning our struggle into strength, for us and for others." The truth, at once unmasked and uncompromising, set the stage for a broader challenge to authority, one forged in solace and tempered by unity. As the marshals prepared for the next leg of their journey, they understood that the justice they pursued was etched with the promise and weight of advocacy transforming into empowerment. The chapter remained unfinished, but the contours of change began to emerge from the shadows, propelled not by rhetoric alone, but by a reverence for truth, a truth that now stood revealed, challenging the old and inviting the new into a reconciled embrace of justice, long delayed but newly illumined. The echoes of the courtroom revelations reverberated deeply within David Marshall, awakening a personal struggle that had simmered beneath the surface throughout the trial. As much as he stood as a symbol of resilience in the public eye, inside he wrestled with the duality of his identity, caught between his role as an FBI agent dedicated to upholding the law and a black man navigating the harsh realities of systemic racism. It was late in the evening, the house quiet save for the gentle hum of nighttime settling in. David sat alone in his study, the dim light from a solitary lamp casting long shadows along the shelves lined with legal texts and personal mementos. On his desk lay the badge that had both empowered and constrained him, a symbol of authority now marred with layers of conflict and introspection. He picked it up, the metal cool against his fingers, reflecting back a visage marked by the past few months' tumultuous journey. It reminded him of the beach a day that seemed both distant and vivid, when the badge had failed to protect against the assumption skin deep. It was an emblem caught in paradox, embodying justice, yet unable to prevent the injustice faced. A duality that plagued his thoughts, the dual roles he inhabited asked different allegiances, pushed by the values he sworn to defend within his profession, and those he kept sacred within his heritage. In his career he had been part of a system, sometimes at odds with his identity, and now that contradiction was front and center, demanding resolution. Jocelyn entered quietly, her presence a soothing balm in the midst of David's introspection. She knew him deeply, her understanding transcending words upon entering the room. Settling into the chair opposite, she studied his expression, sensing the weight he carried. "You're still pondering it all, aren't you?" she asked softly, her gaze filled with empathy. "Every day," David admitted, the words escaping like an exhalation he'd held too long. Being an agent, swearing to uphold these laws that should protect all equally, it translates differently when I see the failure laid bare. Jocelyn nodded, reaching across the table to hold his hand. "You're not just part of the system, David. You're one of the people striving to change it. Your experiences, our experiences, they're shaping new conversations, reforming what fairness should mean." The conviction in her voice provided him solace, a reminder that his efforts, combined with theirs, had meaning ripples, resonating with possibility against entrenched indifference. "But what if it's not enough?" he pressed, the vulnerability of the question layered with the gravity of hope and fear. "All this trust in the system still discards parts of who I am." Her fingers squeezed his reassuringly, a gentle tether grounding him. "Then it's up to us to keep pushing for the system that honors every part of you, every part of everyone. I know we face powerful tides, but each ripple created has its impact no matter how gradual." David let the words sink into the quiet room, echoing with truths binding them closely, built from threads woven stronger for the tests they had endured. In the following days, David embraced a new phase of his role within the Bureau. Conversations with colleagues took on layers of meaning, imbued with the knowledge from lived experiences he now offered as a catalyst for internal change, mirroring the transparency they argued for in the training sessions. Once procedural, were now invigorated by narratives, infused with reality, personal accounts guiding understanding, bridging identities not only as dualities but also as whole. He became instrumental in crafting new policies aimed explicitly at everything hidden beneath polished veneer biases, assumptions, and the insidious nature of systemic deceit. The reflection within the agency extended beyond dialogue, translating into mentorship and active collaboration with community leaders. It inspired new proxies for accountability, systems inviting transparency over opacity, engagement over detachment. Each step forward, viewed through the prism of his journey, carried acknowledgement that while the road remained difficult, it was now paved with collective effort, a torch he bore with those willing to march beside him. David's personal struggles didn't diminish, but they evolved, entwined with a sense of purpose bridging individual narrative with collective action. It fostered a dignity unfurling through finding synergy between duty and identity, composed within a new moral paradigm. Returning home from these efforts, a familiar scene found him, a family who had faced the unknown, now seated around the comforts of shared warmth, embracing unconditional love. From their trials, the Marshalls nurtured an expansion of justice's reach, etching into the world an indelible mark, a testament to resilience through adversity, unity over division. For David, the struggle was ongoing but reframed, transforming the balance between personal truth and institutional allegiance into avenues of reform, ascending a journey to reimagine narratives tied inexorably to footprints etched brightly into the weaving fabric of tomorrow. The Marshall home, usually a sanctuary from the world's tumult, became the backdrop for an intense family discussion one evening. The day's events sat heavy in the air, reverberating through their lives with both urgency and a call for reflection. It was as if the very walls absorbed the emotions, reflecting back the tension that crackled between them. Malik sat at the kitchen table, his posture rigid, eyes locked on a textbook that remained unopened. Across from him, Jocelyn moved with a calm demeanor that belied the underlying storm within the room. The air was thick with unspoken words as Malik's younger siblings watched hesitantly from the couch, sensing the undercurrent of conflict that anchored their gathering. "Malik, you've been quiet." Jocelyn finally broke the silence, her voice gentle yet probing. "What's on your mind?" Malik looked up from the book, struggling to articulate the jumble of thoughts that had been festering inside. "I don't know, Mom. It's just, I'm tired of being the case they talk about. Everywhere I go, it's all people see. It's not fair." The frustration behind his words was palpable, the pressure of being scrutinized by peers and adults alike taking its toll. A younger sibling nodded in agreement, eyes wide and searching, a silent echo of Malik's internalized struggle. "We're more than just a headline," Jocelyn acknowledged, attempting to soothe the dissonance that Malik felt. "But we're also part of something that's important, something that can change things for the better." Malik's gaze turned inward, grappling with the broader implications of their reality. "I get it, I do. But I didn't choose any of this. I feel like I can't ever just be me. Like I always have to be the poster child for all this change." David joined them at the table, understanding the dual pressures of identity Malik faced. He had lived such paradoxes himself, wondering how his family's narrative would shape his son. "I understand, Malik," David said, his voice a blend of empathy and authority. "The world sometimes makes us symbols, but our strength is what we do with that platform. You can be both, part of this bigger narrative and true to who you are." Malik's eyes softened, the defenses he had unconsciously erected starting to lower, though uncertainty still clouded his expression. "But what if who I am isn't enough?" Jocelyn quickly countered, leaning forward, her presence a stabilizing anchor. "Maybe that's exactly why it matters. Because who you are is exactly what the world needs, Malik. Your voice, your experiences, they're shaping a conversation some people haven't known how to start." The dialogue grew, each family member contributing to the unfolding narrative, their shared beliefs interwoven with intimate truths and tangible fears. The younger children, sensing the tonal shift, ventured into the conversation, their simple questions carrying profound weight. "Does it hurt because we're different?" Kareem asked, the innocence in his query cutting through the complexities adults often complicate. "No," David replied, his hand tousling Kareem's hair affectionately. "Being different doesn't hurt. It's the world's reaction to that difference that sometimes does, but we get to challenge those reactions." The room filled with a renewed sense of purpose, the family's introspection transforming uncertainty into tangible action. Beneath the spotlight, they were more than the sum of their hardships. They were architects of insight, crafting futures from the threads of their struggles. "Let's not forget this, okay?" Jocelyn suggested, drawing them close, creating a circle of unity amidst minor chaos. "We support each other as we grow. Whether we're in the spotlight or not, we shape what follows." Night fell softly beyond their windows, but inside, the family emerged from the conversation, emboldened by a renewed commitment to one another and the path they traversed. In their shared thoughts, they found clarity, a direction not dictated by others, but chosen with intention and resilience. For Malik, And indeed, each family member, the evening's conversation, offered the reassurance that they were more than mere symbols in a wider narrative. They were active participants in a profound dialogue, drawing strength from shared understanding and love. As the Marshall family dispersed, returning to nightly rituals and bedtime stories, they knew the external battle they faced was mirrored internally, an evolution that began with vulnerability but forged strength anew. Between them, a forged bond. Between walls, echoes of hope and determination, reverberating long after the lights dimmed for the night. The dawning of the new day brought with it both promise and the ever-looming specter of the ongoing struggle. But for the Marshall family, the growing solidarity extended beyond their household, weaving into the fabric of their community and the nation itself. As the details of their battle unfolded in court and their story echoed in media outlets, a groundswell of community support began to materialize, an indomitable force fueled by unity and the unyielding desire for change. In their town, community leaders, local organizers, and activists gathered, with the resilience hollered from every corner, planting the seeds for a series of events aimed at amplifying the Marshall family's call for justice and reform. The town hall buzzed with fervent determination, as plans for rallies, educational seminars, and strategic meetings formed the core of their grassroots efforts. On a crisp Saturday afternoon, the Marshall family arrived at a local park, where a rally was poised to set the groundwork for broader community engagement. Jocelyn and David, flanked by their children, approached the heart of the gathering, a constellation of faces, many familiar but others new, reflecting the diverse tapestry not just of their neighborhood, but of the shared stakes across communities agonizingly familiar with injustices spun by societal weaving. The stage stood center, modest yet powerful against the open sky. Placards and banners flourished among the crowd, each word and image echoing the values of equality, justice, and change boldly demanded. Statements like "Stand up, speak out," and "Justice is a journey, not a destination," colored the scene with vibrant urgency. As the marshals ascended the stage, a hush rippled through the gathered mass, each person attuned to the narrative shared by this family at the center of their cause. Jocelyn stepped forward, pausing to absorb the embodiment of solidarity born from struggle, her heart brimming with shared resilience. "We stand here today, not as victims, but as advocates," she began, her voice clear and resolute, fueled by both vulnerability and strength. "Our family's story is just one of many. It's a struggle shared by countless others whose voices often remain unheard." Her words cast a net of inclusive empathy across the crowd, binding together those present with the unyielding thread of shared purpose. "We're here to demand change, not just in policies, but in the very systems designed to uphold our rights. It's about building a community that reflects the values of justice for all." Her call to action was met with a tide of applause, affirming shouts and applause rising from the crowd like a chorus, a living testament to their collective mission. David addressed them next, a familiar voice now tethered with the gravity of leadership, a role both daunting yet welcomed. "Today we rally not just for ourselves, but for every family forced to endure what should never be a reality. Together we bear witness and take steps forward to ensure a future where dignity and fairness are uncompromised." Malik, clasping his father's hand, spoke with the earnest conviction dawning alongside his new understanding, his words bridging the chasm between generations. "We're stronger when we lift each other, and I'm learning that's what really drives change. We can't do it alone." The crowd erupted again, their unified energy setting ablaze an atmosphere charged with intent and hope. For Malik, the transition from reluctance to purpose brought forth a sense of belonging now larger than any single person. Throughout the rally, speeches were accompanied by thoughtful discussions, workshops, and booths providing educational resources. A sense of purpose pervaded each exchange, building, not without challenges, but resilient spirit stealing against the tide of indifference. David and Jocelyn, surrounded by encouraging individuals and groups offering assistance, legal aid, community support, outreach projects, realized that the fight for justice had transformed from an isolating struggle into a communal movement, driven by the power released when people refused to stand idly by. Evening fell, casting golden hues over the park as the day's activities crescendoed toward purpose, reignited, extending farther from familiar ground. Attendees dispersed with goals recalibrated by refreshed vision, a drive cemented by their collective choice to uphold one another's dignity. As the Marshall family wound their way back home, the conversations continued, their minds alight with ideas and reflections forged in the heat of communal advocacy. What began as a personal confrontation with injustice now resided in the orbit of a much grander change, a testament to the immortal resolve of those unified under shared skies. In the days and weeks that followed, spurred on by the rally's momentum, the community and indeed the nation took forward steps toward implementing the changes they had long envisioned, steps that were once tentative but now grounded in collective action and unwavering hope. For the Marshalls, this journey, born from adversity, had now branched into an authoritative tapestry, each stitch woven with the intent to propel tangible and profound transformation. And as they've come to understand that together, they could accomplish the extraordinary, the very essence of justice they sought reached beyond the barriers of personal plight into the once unimaginable realm of united change. The days following the rally saw figures and discussions converge toward a tangible intersection of actions that promised progress. Momentum gathered beneath a burgeoning awareness in legislative corridors, sparking negotiations and conversations that would ultimately determine the fate of policy reforms long overdue. Within the office of the state senator who had taken up the Marshall family's cause, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Senator Lisa Harding, known for her advocacy for marginalized communities, sat across the table from a group of advisors and colleagues, each ready to dissect the nuances of the proposed justice reforms. She had become a pivotal figure, using her platform to champion the changes inspired by the Marshall family's narrative. The proposed reforms before them ranged from implementing mandatory de-escalation training for law enforcement officers to establishing independent review boards for misconduct claims, a suite of measures aiming to address systemic biases within the justice system. These proposals could redefine the landscape of community law enforcement relations, Harding asserted, her voice echoing a steadfast commitment to not just incremental steps, but monumental shifts. But we need to ensure this isn't just a Band-Aid on systemic wounds. It has to be comprehensive, holistic. Her team nodded in agreement, acknowledging both the complexity and necessity of such measures. This was no ordinary policy discussion. It was laden with the weight of history and the potential for shaping a more equitable future. Meanwhile, in the legal precincts, Nina Collins and her firm worked tirelessly to support these legislative efforts. They compiled data, provided case studies, and leveraged media narratives to highlight the urgency for change. Their advocacy reached beyond courtroom confines into everyday dialogues, bridging the gap between law and lived experience. David Marshall's role also evolved in this critical juncture. He found himself immersed in conversations that not only drew from his experiences, but sought his input on effectively engaging federal levels of policymaking. It was a challenging yet invigorating position, one he embraced fully, recognizing its potential to impact broader systems beyond immediate confines. In their community and far beyond, a network of support knitted itself under a unified premise for action. Activists, educators, and citizens began organizing forums and discussions aimed at unpacking the layers of the reforms being proposed, scrutinizing the legislative language to ensure it met the real needs expressed by those most affected. At home, the Marshall family felt the pulse of these developments in real time, riding the ebbs and flows of hope mixed with the pragmatism of their experiences. Malik, now acclimated to the role thrust upon him, engaged frequently with peers in school discussions, bringing back tales of other students' shared stories and aspirations for a justice that seemed finally within reach. The culmination of grassroots efforts came at a public forum held at the state capitol. It was a diverse gathering of community members, officials, and advocates, each prepared to speak to the human aspects that statistical reports often missed. Lisa Harding delivered a keynote address that drew threads from the tumultuous journey that brought them together. The injustices faced cannot remain invisible cogs in an unseen machine. By recognizing the pervasive impact these issues have, by translating them into laws that uplift rather than oppress, we acknowledge our collective humanity. That's how transformation begins. Her words set the stage for an inspired dialogue that spread like wildfire through the gathered assembly. Community leaders shared stories, each voice a poignant echo of resilience, betrayal, and hope. David, too, stood to speak, articulating with conviction the bridge between personal experience and legislative action. "We have an opportunity," he stated, his voice reverberating through the hall, tempered yet impassioned, "to ensure that any system vested with the duty of protecting does so fairly, upholding its promise to every individual. May this be remembered as a turning point, not just for the Marshalls, but for every family whose trust in justice is honored, never exploited." Applause followed, reverberating throughout the chamber, a symphony of affirmation and an earnest plea for accountability woven through applause. Back home, as they gathered after the forum, the Marshall family felt enveloped by the rippling effects of their courage, catalyzed into action. Discussions continued over dinner, their conversations seasoned with insights shared and stories broadening their perspectives. "Are you scared?" asked Kareem, curiosity tinting his young voice, as they spoke of the changes proposed and the resistance faced. "A little," David admitted, his candidness striking a balance of honesty. "But fear's a part of courage. It helps us see what matters most and fuels our determination to make things right." In subsequent weeks, as legislative efforts gained traction and tightened into cohesive proposals ready for debate, the families and communities that had rallied together held hope as both a shield and a spear, a promise to be upheld against the inertia of the status quo. For the Marshalls, the journey continued, shaped not only by headlines and hearings, but by the vision of a framework for justice that resonated with universal chords of fairness and respect, waiting to be composed into tomorrow's legacy. The day arrived, laden with significance, when the courtroom once again became the theater of resolution, its proceedings echoing not only the Marshalls' determined hope, but also the expansive public impulse for justice. Courtroom benches filled with keen observers, their anticipation palpable, while outside, the swell of collective voices gathered as communities held their breath. Inside, the atmosphere brimmed with a tension made of expectation, each person present aware of the history being written, each moment carrying the weight of societal consequence. The judge entered, her gaze sweeping the courtroom, briefly resting on the Marshalls, who embodied the resilience now etched into every corner of the room. As she took her place at the bench, silence fell, and the room's focus tightened, the air humming with possibility. "We have reached a conclusion in the case of the Marshall family versus the local police department," she began, her voice a careful balance of authority and acknowledgement of the larger narrative that unfolded within these walls. "The court has reviewed the evidence, considered the testimonies, and evaluated the systemic factors at play in this case." The judge paused, allowing her words to resonate, the suspense palpable as the courtroom leaned collectively towards her next declaration. "In favor of the plaintiffs, the court finds that the defendants engaged in a pattern of racial profiling and discrimination against Mr. and Mrs. Marshall and their family. The police department is ordered to undergo comprehensive reforms, including mandatory training focused on racial bias and the establishment of an independent oversight committee." A ripple of reaction surged through the courtroom and out into the public beyond. Relief, validation, and the hope for substantive change coursed through the hearts of those gathered around this apex moment of justice served. Jocelyn felt David's hand tighten around hers, the warmth of that grip reflecting years' worth of struggle and aspiration now realized within legal affirmation. Malik, who had found his voice amid the turmoil, sat with a budding conviction that justice could indeed transcend barriers when courage met advocacy. The judge continued, her judgment anchoring the case within the larger narrative of reform. "This ruling, while concerning this singular case, serves as a foundation for addressing deeper systemic inequalities that must be engaged engaged by law enforcement agencies and communities at large. Applause erupted, contained but fervent, eventually reverberating through the gallery and back again, an echo chamber of collective gratitude and recognition. The moment felt like both an end and a beginning, this chapter achieving closure even as foundations for new struggles took shape. As the courtroom emptied, eager to share the verdict with communities nationwide tuned into this landmark decision, the Marshals found themselves the heart of a steadily growing circle of allies. Nina Collins stood with them, a reassuring presence marked by success in both legal realm and personal advocacy. "We did it," Nina said with a smile, her eyes meeting the Marshals. "This is just the start, a testament that complexities can be unraveled and justice sought by those courageous enough to confront them." Outside, the media converged, microphones poised to capture the aftermath, a flurry of questions surging toward them, their responses measured beneath the light of newfound progress. "Mr. and Mrs. Marshall, how do you feel about the outcome and its implications?" asked a reporter, the anticipation of a narrative conclusion threading through her inquiry. David absorbed the inquiry with thoughtfulness before replying. "We're grateful the court recognized what happened to us, but this isn't just about our family. It's a step toward ensuring communities across the country can rebuild trust in systems meant to protect them," Jocelyn added, the fervor of advocacy illuminating her tone. "This verdict reflects the faith we placed in justice, faith that should extend beyond moments into enduring practice. It sets a precedent for accountability and reform." Their words resonated outward, cascading through airwaves and digital channels, reaching communities where stories of struggle persisted beneath layers of silence. In the weeks that unfolded post-verdict, tangible shifts began to form. Police departments, prompted by the court's example, initiated dialogues within communities to restructure relations, drawing individuals intricately into collaborative reform committees. Inspired by the Marshall ruling, set in motion legislation designed to amplify oversight and institutionally normative practices. The residue of change reached the fabric of wider society, reflected in headlines and classrooms where dialogues took root, reshaping perceptions and stoking the fires of humanity's inherent quest for fairness. For the Marshall family, the victory was precious, the culmination of a journey defined by resilience and unwavering belief in possibility. Not a denouement, but an anchor for further progress, an enduring symbol of resolution cultivating justice beyond mere victories. Standing at a crossroads of historical and present understanding, they embraced the unity fortifying their community and the nation, a legacy steeped in the willingness to redefine destiny, resonating through the threads of tomorrow, immeasurable yet impactful. Knowing they were both authors and navigators of this transformative odyssey, as the echoes of their story wove into the broader tapestry of societal conscience, it became evident the reverberations of this case would persist, ensuring the dawn of a new, equitable paradigm. Dreaming within reach, chartered not only by hope, but steeled by determination's uncompromising core. In the weeks following the verdict, a palpable sense of change rippled through the town, its echoes stretching far beyond local boundaries. The court's decision had not only sparked an upheaval within the police department, but had also kindled a renewed effort to rebuild trust and transform community relations fundamentally. For the Marshals, the victory carried with it a quiet validation, a confirmation of the endurance and hope invested in their arduous journey. Yet, as every triumph emerges with its own set of challenges, the immediate aftermath necessitated grappling with how to navigate reconciliation and forgiveness within a community still coming to terms with its realities. Across town, open forums were established, places where residents, law enforcement, and leaders gathered to engage in earnest dialogue, conversations that bore the potent potential to heal rifts long ignored. These meetings, freed from formal rigors and fortified by candidness, became spaces where voices intertwined in discourse and mutual understanding. David found himself deeply involved in these discussions, serving as a bridge between his experiences and the aspirations for a community yearning for equilibrium. He spoke often of accountability, not as a cornerstone upon which trust might be steadily rebuilt. At one such forum, held under the vaulted ceilings of a municipal building resonant with civic history, David shared the floor with Chief Bryant, the police department's newly appointed chief, known for his progressive outlook. As David took the podium, the room listened intently, eager for guidance and resolution. "We're at a turning point," he said, his gaze unwavering as it traveled across faces both familiar and fresh. "Accountability must evolve into understanding and change. It's about seeing one another as allies in the cause for safety, not adversaries." Chief Bryant stepped up next to David, the juxtaposition of their positions a testament to the potential of collaboration for shared goals. "The path forward is collective," Bryant acknowledged, his voice reflective of his earnest intent to change. "We must shed complacency to actively seek out and dismantle practices that divide. Our role is to protect, and that protection starts with inclusion and respect." The forum buzzed with encouraged dialogue, participants from different walks of life voicing long-suppressed concerns, exchanging perspectives, and developing strategies to ensure this singular verdict became a seed for widespread justice. One resident, an elderly woman who had seen the town through various phases of growth and regression, voiced a sentiment that resonated through the room. "It's not only about the laws, but also about how we choose to live them," she asserted. "The legacy here rests with all of us, choosing empathy over division, bridging our world with understanding." Outside the forum, conversations trickled into everyday spaces, coffee shops and schools, homes and parks, each a node in a growing network of collective realization. As stories of injustice interlaced with tales of hope, people began to witness the tender shoots of trust cautiously emerging from the soil of reform. For the younger Marshall children, school transformed from a place shadowed by their family's publicity into an arena of discovery shaped by the newfound camaraderie forged alongside peers. Discussions once awkwardly avoided were now embraced, and lessons in civics took on an added authenticity. At home, the Marshalls found solace in the reflective quiet that followed resolution. Yet it was within these moments that Malik felt the ever-present tug of his evolving identity. He approached his parents one evening, the weight of his burgeoning roles softly coloring his words. "Do you think this changes anything?" he asked, curiosity lacing every syllable. "I mean, does it really?" Jocelyn responded with warmth, her answer nuanced and imbued with the foresight of experience. "Change is a journey, Malik. It's about the commitment to keep steering even amidst resistance. This win was just one part, but it's a part that energized the path forward." David nodded, adding with a quiet strength, "We need to continue challenging what doesn't align with fairness, not for us alone, but for everyone who sees themselves in our story. That's how we honor this change and help it grow." With their actions, words, and alliances sown from a shared quest, the Marshall family began to feel the gentle stirrings of trust rebuilding. Their home, once confined to an epicenter of struggle, now opened its doors to conversations as they wisely navigated this redefined world. In the broader community, progress was tangible, albeit incremental. New policies began to unfold. Programs emerged fostering collaboration between law enforcement and residents, and the shared pursuit of peace became etched into the community's guiding principles. Reflecting upon the steps they had taken, the Marshalls realized that while the road was long, each stride was significant. Every interaction, meeting, and connection carried the torch of reform, lighting the path ahead with possibilities born from hard-won unity. As stars rose over their town, threading hope into the night sky, the Marshalls understood that change, real and lasting, was not just possible, but inevitable. It unfolded from their strength, binding communities in the indelible promise of unity, truth, and justice, written collectively, line by line, in the annals of their journey's defining legacy. As the community worked collaboratively to forge a path of reconciliation and reform, signs of tangible progress began to take root. The changes, once mere aspirations articulated in the wake of the Marshall family struggle, started manifesting in policies and practices across the justice system. These shifts promised a new dawn for equity, carrying the potential to reshape the societal landscape. In the legislative corridors where these changes took form, lawmakers, advocates, and community leaders like David Marshall and Senator Lisa Harding were instrumental in shepherding the reforms from concept to reality. Their efforts culminated in the passage of a comprehensive justice reform bill, a testament to the power of collective action, perseverance, and the relentless pursuit of fairness. The legislation embodied sweeping changes aimed at rectifying long-standing injustices. It mandated comprehensive racial bias training for all law enforcement officers, established independent boards to oversee police misconduct, and included measures designed to enhance community engagement and transparency within policing policies. These reforms represented not just patches on a fractured system, but steps to redefine the relations between authorities and the communities they serve. On the day the bill was signed, a ceremony unfolded at the state capitol, a symbolic gathering of changemakers who dedicated themselves to this journey. The atmosphere was infused with a reflective celebration, a recognition of battles fought, and the solidarity that fueled them. As David and his family stood within this assembly, joined by familiar faces and new allies, he reflected in silent awe at how far they had come, a transcendent journey from a beachside confrontation to influencing statewide reform. Senator Harding took the podium, her words weaving together gratitude and vision. This legislation stands as proof that when communities reject silence for empowerment, transformation becomes inevitable. Our work does not stop here. It begins anew each day, strengthened by the foundations we have laid today. Applause erupted, a thunderous testament to determined unity echoing across hopeful horizons. People from diverse backgrounds, bringing their shared and personal stories, now stood interlinked in a tapestry woven from resilience and renewed hope. At the heart of it all, Jocelyn felt tears mist her eyes, not solely of relief, but gratitude. Embracing her children, she whispered a truth, capturing the depth of their shared experience. This is your legacy. You're part of something bigger now. Your voices matter. For Malik, this journey infused new resolve into his youthful spirit, a baptism of advocacy shaping who he was becoming. The courtroom ordeal had once felt like an unjust burden, but now it transformed, crystallizing into an understanding deeper than he could have imagined. In the weeks that followed the bill's signing, the community, emboldened by its newfound unity, channeled its focus into cultivating the changes it sought. Committees formed, embedding community voices into policing strategies. Engagement sessions led to breakthroughs, a constant dialogue expanding understanding and dismantling preconceptions. For the Marshall family, this shift represented both closure and inception, the end of their personal legal battle, yet the beginning of broader societal quests. Guest lectures, panels, and even neighborhood meetings became platforms where they shared their story, inspiring others to rise for transformation, graced with the resilience of hope. The conversations around growth, healing, and justice expanded beyond state lines, drawing interest and emulation from communities similarly navigating the complexities of their circumstances. The Marshalls' experiences ignited a beacon that transcended local narratives, reaching far into the realm of possibilities, tangibly fostered by shared humanity. One evening, as the family gathered under a sky dotted with stars, a quiet sense of achievement settled among them. Each looked toward the vastness above, feeling the reverberations of their journey reflected in constellations pinned like ancestral guides, a cosmic testament to justice's enduring trajectory. Kareem, youthful curiosity ignited, asked, "Do you think it will always be like this? Everyone getting along, wanting to listen and change?" David chuckled softly, embracing both son and the gravity of truth. "We'll keep working for that, Kareem. But real change is nurtured by effort, understanding, and it grows every day we choose to honor each other's stories," Jocelyn added, her voice a soothing chord linking past and future. "And every little victory is important. The ripple that becomes the wave." In that moment, drawn beneath the stars, the Marshalls knew their enduring journey had authored pages binding struggle through solidarity, a dynamic narrative that underscored justice's ever-evolving landscape. This trajectory of triumph through shared pursuit left an indelible mark on each family member, keepers of promises to ensure their story reverberated into every tomorrow, laced with threads spinning hope into the fabric of change. As they looked upward into that endless night, they carried this legacy forward, aflame with a commitment and unyielding drive to forge pathways where understanding birthed action, and stories ignited futures shaped by an unwavering, collective heart. The final chapter of the journey unfolded in a more introspective, yet no less powerful manner. Within the softened pace of life's return to normalcy, the Marshalls found themselves reflecting on both the victories achieved and the lessons learned. The immediate tumult subsided, leaving in its place a profound understanding of resilience, change, and the interconnectedness of their actions with the wider world. Despite the subdued aftermath of a public battle concluded, the mission for sustained change now resonated quietly through community initiatives, educational efforts, and the continual dialogue fostered among diverse audiences. The reforms enacted set the backdrop for new narrative stories of communities learning to trust in justice, articulated with humanity at its core. On a crisp autumn evening, the family gathered around their backyard fire pit, soaking in the tranquility of the moment as flames danced against the encroaching chill of night. It was a sacred family ritual, one that had provided solace amidst trials spread over many months. "It's almost hard to believe it's finally over," Jocelyn mused, her gaze fixed on the flickering embers. Her voice carried a blend of relief and the recognition of a journey well-traveled, though its legacy beckoned forward. David nodded, the flames reflecting in his eyes like mirrors of achieved aspirations. "It is, but what we've created has roots that will hopefully grow for a long time. It's not as much an end as it is a new beginning." Malik, now shaped by the wisdom of the journey, leaned closer, a thoughtful expression illuminating his features. "I used to think we were just victims of something unfair," he admitted, a wry smile touching his lips. "But I think we're more than that, like we're part of changing things so it doesn't happen to someone else." Kareem, ever the inquisitive spirit, echoed a sentiment that resonated with all. "Do you think people will remember what happened here? Will it always mean something?" His question lingered, hanging in the crisp air, prompting a reflective pause and the subtle realization that even in resolution, the journey retained areas unexplored, future stories inked with memory and potential. Jocelyn gathered her children close, her voice a quiet pledge threaded through future dreams. "What we did, what all of us did, has created ripples. Maybe people won't always remember our names, but they'll feel the impact because we stood up when it mattered." Her words enveloped the family in warmth, assuring them of their actions' significance in shaping ethos, extending beyond their immediate environment into broader emboldenment. As nighttime deepened, they lingered by the fire, absorbed in the symphony of silence underscored by crackling logs. It was in these quiet moments that the Marshall family embraced a deeper truth. Change, while nurtured by collective momentum, was also inherently personal. A choice renewed with each decision bound for justice. Their narrative, once confined within adversarial courtrooms, now spun sails into uncharted waters. The legacy of their struggle, an imprint on societal conscience, braided with aspirations for enduring justice, remained anchored in the strings of familial strength. Aspiration alchemized into forward narratives of hope and activism. Leaning back, David let the serene weight of togetherness settle around him. His voice, gentle yet powerful, encapsulated the core of their shared epic. "We've shown that no one stands alone when truth finds its voice. Now it's about tending the seeds planted here so they continue to grow. Those seeds, a foundation for possibilities unconstrained by boundaries, thrived within the luminous pathways shaped by the Marshall family's journey, embodying an unspoken promise wrapped in unity and resilience. As stars blinked overhead, stitches of hope woven into the fabric of the night, the marshals knew they were creators of more than justice. They were cultivators of an existence where empathy mirrored action, transforming singular experiences into shared legacies of strength and wisdom. And as the incandescent glow of their intimate gathering flickered into the night, they were left with a quiet understanding. The echoes of their journey would forever resonate within the heartbeats of those compelled to carry it forward, calling to action a world ready to listen, nurture, and transform. How do you feel about this journey? We invite you to leave your thoughts in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe to the Black Voices channel for more stories that continue to illuminate and inspire change.